This video is sponsored by my favorite website creator, Squarespace, the best place to go when you want to get a domain or create a beautiful website or an online store. Okay, one thing that happens almost all the time when you tell someone you live in London who doesn't live in London themselves is that they go, oh, but London is so this or that. And like, people who live in London are so XYZ. There are so many opinions and myths about life in London that I'm doing my duty as a Londoner of almost 10 years now. I'm going to truthfully answer the question, are all the horrible myths about London really true? Well, we'll see. I asked you on Instagram a while back to tell me your myths about London, and there were by far 2 myths that were repeated again and again and again more than anything else. The first one of them being that London is extremely expensive and you can really only live here decently and safely if you're like stinking rich. Is that true? Overall, I would say yes. I wouldn't say you have to be stinking rich, but you definitely have to make like not only a comfortable salary, but a good salary to live here nicely. I know a lot of Londoners who make a decent salary, but still can't afford to live in areas that are like truly nice and safe. And London is so massive, to be able to like buy something like a flat or a terraced house, people move like further and further out where it takes like forever to get to Central. Most people in London though make nowhere near enough money to even think about buying their own home. And this is one of the main reasons we left London the first time we lived here. We just didn't feel that we could like live decently and nicely with the money we were making at the time. Now we live like really well, but it has taken us years of like making good money and saving ruthlessly to be able to buy this flat, which is in a nice and safe area. I'm still like pinching myself that we like pulled it off in London. So yes, expensive as hell. The myth is definitely true, sad to say. But the even more common myth that you mentioned on Instagram was that it's always raining in London. The weather is like grey, bleak, sad, and you can never leave the house without an umbrella. This, my friends, is not true. I mean, we moved here from Stockholm, which actually has more yearly precipitation than London. I think the difference is that in London, it rains quite often, but only for like, you know, these 10-minute drizzly little mini showers. Whereas if it rains in Stockholm or in other places, it really rains for like a whole day, or at least for like hours at a time. So even though the weather app shows like chance of rain quite often, it's usually like nothing, like a little shower at 2 a.m. So I actually find London to have incredibly beautiful weather, a lot of sun, a lot of light fluffy clouds, usually like very balmy and semi-warm, like perfect walking around the city type of weather. Or like what I like to call Gilmore Girls weather, you know, like every season being quite lovely with inoffensive weather, even though the seasons change throughout the year. So as you can hear, the myth is false, and truly, I have nothing to complain about when it comes about the weather. Everyone, and I mean everyone, loves to talk shit about Londoners. So the next few myths are about like the specific type of person who lives here. And one myth, which I'm very sad to say is true, is the myth of the flaky Londoner. If you make a plan with a Londoner, don't expect that plan to happen. Like late arrivals, date cancellations, rain checks, and like last minute, I'm feeling a little under the weather texts are like all very common occurrences. And as a natural born Swede, I have a really hard time handling this. I think if you make a plan, you stick to it unless you have, you know, projectile vomiting food poisoning or something. I'm not adjusting well to the fact that I can never know if a planned date will actually happen. Cancelling, I find it incredibly rude, and I'm not going to assimilate to this particular London culture. Next myth, Londoners are rude and stressed. No, not true. I mean, of course you will find some rude and stressed people. It's not uncommon to like run into them in a city this huge and this hectic. Like rush hour tube traffic, it's not nice. But in general, Londoners are, in my opinion, absolutely lovely. Like when I go on my daily walk, old men will like tip their cap and like greet me good morning, or like people will help you with directions if you're lost, or like strangers will come up to you and you say that you look nice if you are dressed up a bit. And if you drop something like on the street, people will stop and help you pick it up. I find that overall, like, of course, depending a bit on which part of London you're in, you know, like touristy central areas are a bit less so, but overall, the mood is very kind and polite and sweet. You will find rude people, of course, but you will find many, many more kind and lovely people. Another myth about the Londoner, that they are snobs. Snobism is alive and well in London, definitely. For me, coming from socialist Sweden, where we of course do have a class system too, but a much more subtle and less obvious one, to see like the extreme class system in London has been quite unnerving. If you come from money, or if you have an education from, Oxbridge, you make damn sure it's audible in your accent. People flash money like mad over here, and it's like common to try to sound posher than you actually are. But on the other hand, there's also a lot of working class pride, with people from like less affluent areas sticking to their own like lovely London area specific accents and speaking with such love and nostalgia and pride about their part of the city. So yes, snobism is everywhere, but thank God there's also like a lot of working class pride too. This next one is a weird one. The myth that London is extremely crowded and loud. The reason this is a weird myth is because I think it's relative. Of course, it depends on like where you are in London. Like if you do your shopping on Oxford Street and you're eating out in Soho, then of course it's going to be absolute madness. So I think most tourists get this impression because all tourists go to the more or less the same places. But often you can like venture just 1 or 2 streets away from a busy street and find it really quite calm and quiet. And for us who live here, who have like homes a bit away from Central, like you can walk around the park and feel really quite alone, like except for the birds. I mean, not really alone, but at least very far from crowded. The other reason I think this is relative is because I think crowds are a thing you sort of get used to. Like when we moved back here after 3 years in Berlin, we were quite overwhelmed by the masses of people and the loudness. Still, I find going out for like a drink or for dinner to usually be quite too loud for my liking, but it's nowhere near as overwhelming as when we first came back after Berlin. On the other hand, now that we are used to crowds, going back to Sweden to visit, or Berlin for example, or indeed any other smaller city, it always feels like we step off the plane to a city who's been like struck by a zombie apocalypse. The streets are so empty. The restaurants are all like half full and quiet. It's eerie. It's not nice at all. You feel like all exposed and like you're not in a city at all. Boring. That's what a city without the crowds feel like now. So yes, you do get used to it. But what about where you live? Is it empty and quiet or crowded and loud? And what do you prefer? I'll choose the like bustling, crowded streets and like millions of people any day. City girl, that's what I am. I've talked about this before, the absolutely ridiculous wealth gap in London. And it's true, the everyday life of like working class, middle class and upper class people is massively different. That is like hard to grasp that we all live in the same city with such variation in like quality of life. It's the most saddening aspect of London and the one thing that I would most like to change. We need some of that like Swedish socialism over here to like even out rents and house prices and to tax the rich and to raise minimum wage and make everyone feel like they're a valued part of this extraordinary city and that everyone deserves to feel safe and have the same quality healthcare and education as the wealthy Londoners. Next myth, London is dirty. Compared to Sweden, yes. Otherwise, it's actually quite clean and pretty. Another really unsavory myth, that people lie to you here and that companies trick you. Basically, that you can't trust anyone. I'm afraid to say it's not a myth that I can completely debunk. Actually, besides from rent prices, this was our #1 reason for leaving London the first time we lived here. There we were, 2 Swedes, utterly naive and gullible, coming from a country where people trust each other and we all believe in the goodness of people. And we found ourselves in the cutthroat dog-eat-dog world of metropolitan London. Did we get scammed? Did we get tricked? Did we trust people we should not have trust? God, yes. Like here, you can't even trust your own doctor. Like your dentist will try to sell you treatments you don't need. Phone companies straight up lie to your face or over the phone. And doing renovations, like forget about it. It was a nightmare. I do believe London is no worse than any other cities though. In fact, I believe London is better than most big cities. But as a Swede, the struggle is real and you have to like develop your bullshit detector really quite pronto or you will lose your money and your pride. Next myth, London flats are substandard. True, they're just horrible. What about London is dangerous? No, I don't think so. Again, it depends on where in London you are and what type of person you are. I don't feel like nearly as safe in London as I do in Stockholm, but I do feel quite safe. Like, I'm a bit on guard, but I'm not sure if that's even based on the reality of like crime rates or if that's just me being influenced by like fear mongering. As a woman, when it comes to like sexual harassment or being like bothered by men on the street or in bars or like catcalling or whatever, I feel like it's much, much better than most places. As a woman, I feel mostly safe, and I witnessed like very few crimes at all in my 10 years as a resident. Another myth is that it's hard to find friends. Compared to many other places, I would say this is true. Like when we moved to Berlin, it was so easy to get to know people, but here, it has taken years to grow like a nice close friend circle. I think it's because this old tradition in England that like if you want to meet someone, you have to first be introduced by a common friend. It's like sometimes considered weird to just like walk up to someone and introduce yourself. But of course, if you're an immigrant who doesn't know anyone, there's like no common friend to introduce you to anyone. So I've just had to like keep reaching out, being weird, making a fool out of myself to like find those like 2 out of 10 people who find it refreshing that I just like out of the blue DM them to ask if we can be friends. I think this is why it's easier with other immigrants. Well, like I always love immigrants most in every country anyway. Wonderful people, my kind of people, the movers. That London wears you out is another myth. I used to find this to be true, that to be like happy in London, you need to take long, calm breaks in like the countryside once in a while to like not go mad. But now, ever since we moved into this flat, which is in like a calm, green residential area, I don't feel like this anymore. I think it's like the greenery and the quiet. Like if you can find a place in London, like an area like this, it cancels the stress and like the need to get some air and like time away from the city. In fact, what I do feel to an almost overwhelming degree is that I don't want to leave. I don't want to go on holiday. I don't want to go back to Sweden. I don't want to like even leave London for a day trip. I just want to be here, like at home, at peace, and in the lovely, beautiful, mad bustle of the city. Because truth be told, I never felt this at home anywhere else. London is like the love of mine and David's life. I walk down the street and I still, to this day, almost 10 years in, I still can't quite believe that I get to live here, that I get to call myself that beautiful word, a Londoner. Where do you live? How are you feeling about your city or town or village? Are you as at home as I am, or are you like ready to move to a new place or maybe even become an immigrant yourself? I could highly recommend it. It's hard, but it's worth it. Like the excitement and sense of adventure is like nothing else. Wherever you are in the world, I hope you feel at home and like you belong. And after all this moving here and there and like staying in 15 flats in 15 years, I think I can finally say that yes, I do feel that I belong. And I just want to stay put. But if you want me to, I'll of course gladly talk more about the quirky culture of London or the socialist wonders of Sweden or all the angry shouting in Berlin. Let me know if so, and give me a like and subscribe if you haven't yet. Why don't you? Oh, and if you want more, you can of course buy my first novel, which is set in London, or pre-order my second novel, which is set in Stockholm, with all the moods and atmospheres of these 2 lovely cities. Now, do you want to create a beautiful site or maybe start your own blog? If so, you should definitely do it with Squarespace. Listen to this, with a new guided design system, Squarespace Blueprint, you can choose from professionally curated layouts and styling options to build a unique online presence from the ground up. Squarespace is also amazing with blogging tools to share your stories, photos and videos to make it easy to reach your audience. You can also auto-post your content to Twitter, Facebook and Tumblr. They also have great traffic analytics so that you can see how many people are visiting your site, how long they're staying for, where they're coming from and what they're interested in, like traveling or health or maybe fashion, for example. So what are you waiting for? Go get your free trial today at squarespace.com, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/jennymustard to get 10% off your first purchase of a website or a domain. That's a good deal. So thank you so much for watching today. I had the best time and I hope to see you next week already. Bye bye.